Hello.
Hello, Derren.
Had to go to another office because
Oh,
the sunlight was going in too much. My wife is very good at these things because we do Zoom all over the world.
it's always good to have a glamorous assistant, isn't it, really? My
Right.
my wife is the same on my tech side, so she helps me with everything. Um, so you well, Darren? You having a nice summer?
Yes, it's very pleasant, very peaceful, and no problems.
Mhm.
Very busy with the company.
Oh, good. Glad to hear it. Um, so we've got a nice little audience watching in the background. So well, thank you for everybody for joining us for this watch along event for the Persuaders, the Old, the New, and the Deadly. Um, I'm sure most people just want to focus on our chat. Others might want to just watch the episode in their own copy of it. If people do want to watch the episode while we're having our chat, it's a very general chat, so it's not a requirement. But if you want to watch the episodes we go along, we just want to pause on the opening shot of the manor house, and then we'll make a
Let me
start
put
in
the
a minute
light
or
on
two.
and see if there's better light.
Okay. Okay, I think we're probably ready to
Better, isn't it?
oh yes, that's better. Yeah, that's good. I'm just going to do a countdown from 5, then we'll press play all at the same time.
Sure.
So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and play. To begin with, Darren, I just want to ask you, because you don't appear until about halfway through this episode, so I just thought I'd have some general sort of career questions to start off with. I was wondering, did you always want to be an actor, and how did you kind of end up going down that path?
No, I always wanted to be an actor because my family were extremely famous as music hall stars. And I didn't want to be in the music hall, and I just really wanted to be an actor. And I started very early. I went to RADA, and they said, "Oh, you've passed," but actually, we found out you're too young. And so in those days, you were sent to Per-RADA, which until you got old enough to go to RADA, which was a year. And then I won a scholarship to RADA, but then I didn't take it up because I preferred for someone who, my family were very wealthy, and I didn't really need it. So I sort of said, give it to somebody else.
Hmm.
And then I went to RADA, and fortunately, I won just about everything. And with the winning the Kendall at the end of the course, I was asked by one of the biggest agents in the country to be with him, and then I went immediately into the Playhouse Oxford to play parts. So and then it just happened, rolled in from there.
So when it came to getting TV work, was it somebody maybe saw you in a play, or did you have an agent that would kind of put you forward for?
Well, he was the biggest agent in London, and so he covered everything from films, everything.
Hmm.
I
And
think it all started when, I mean, I'd never done an audition. I think nowadays everybody auditions to say yes or no, which is a bit stupid because presumably the casting agents in nowadays don't know what they're doing. In my day, a casting agent saw everything. They asked you to be in the film because they knew you would be right for it. They didn't expect you to audition for 5 lines as they do now. So I did a film called Victim. I was asked to be in Victim. And before Victim, I was supposed to be a Shakespearean actor because I won the Forbes Robinson Shakespeare Award at RADA. And everybody said, "Oh, well, he's a Shakespearean actor, he's not a modern actor." And then I did Victim. And then they said, "Oh, no, he's a modern actor, he's not a Shakespearean actor." So I've been very lucky, really. I just, very lucky.
yeah. So even though your parents were in the show business, were they
Yeah.
very happy that you went into acting? Were they supportive of?
No, no, because they were ashamed of having an actor as a son. They wanted they wanted someone to be in the musical halls.
Mm.
But they were very famous. They took London by storm overnight in 1928.
And
I only ever saw him on a Sunday.
well, would you go to see your parents perform? Was that something that you remember seeing
Well, I
them?
actually didn't know him at all. In fact, I don't think we ever had a conversation, but that's another story.
Hmm. And so you sort of broke into television with The Adventures of Sir Lancelot,
Yeah,
then 56, 57. Do you recall your first television appearances?
yeah, that was great fun. I mean, again, they asked me to be in it, and you played everything. One week you were a monk, the next week you were a knight, the next week you were a villain, and so they were done every 5 days, which was really very great fun.
Hmm. There's a link with The Adventures of Sir Lancelot with Doctor Who. William Russell was in that. Do you remember working with William Russell?
Oh yes, indeed. In fact, I mean, no one wanted to admit that they were working on Doctor Who because it was a cheap English children's program. It was stuck in a studio away from the BBC, and William Hartnell was a very famous West End actor. And of course, he was ashamed to be in it because you didn't mention that you were in it because it was such a cheap, you know, children's program. They never believed it would do anything. And that's why they got rid of all the early episodes.
Well, I think the show did get some clout when the Daleks came along, and it was sort of a bit of
Well,
a Dalek
the
mania moment.
Daleks never made I mean, at the particular time, the Daleks were there and they still got rid of the shows.
Hmm. Yeah, there was a whole uh, wiping policy that the BBC had ITV, and they got rid of
Well, yeah,
loads of shows,
because
sadly.
in those days it was black and white, I think, and you couldn't
Mhm.
really stop the tape, so
No.
they had to be basically live.
Yeah.
And I remember in that particular one of Doctor Who, the director wanted a monkey on the shoulder of one of the actors. Titi Lemko, his name was, a little nice guy. Anyway, they didn't realize that the monkey really got rather frightened by all the cameras and the lights and everything. Anyway, it escaped up into the gantry and had diarrhea. So one was doing scenes, and you never knew whether or not there would be a sump of excrement from this poor terrified monkey.
Mhm.
And they had to bring in the fire brigade to get him down from the gantry after the episode was finished.
Oh dear, yeah. You made a good point that it was shot on videotape, so it was basically done as a live
Oh
performance.
yeah, basically live. Even in plays in those days, on the corner of the room, there would be a woman or a man with a button, and the pressing of the button would stop the speech, the sound, and she would give the prompt if the actor forgot his words.
Hmm. Well, William Hartnell was very famous for fluffing his lines and sort of forgetting. Did he do that much on Doctor Who?
Well, no, not really, because he didn't really have very much to say.
Yeah.
There wasn't a great deal to actually say.
Hmm. Bit of a lighter episode for him, it seems.
Yeah,
And but I suppose your theatre experience helped with doing live TV because you didn't have the
yeah. Well,
nerves.
it's also different. You can't compare, film with stage or whatever. I mean, I've done, I suppose, hundreds of stage plays, probably because my best friend who just died, Bill Kenwright, I worked for him. In fact, he was
Hmm.
a patron of our company, as indeed was Roger Moore, because I knew Roger very well. So I mean, our company now is Our Price, not Our Price. That was a company I started with my brother. We can talk about that later.
Yeah.
New Era Academy, which is now one of the leading drama examination boards in the country. Regulated, I must add.
Oh yeah, yeah. So of course, The Persuaders is on glorious 35mm film. So it was very much like shooting a film versus.
Oh, totally the
Yeah.
same.
Mm.
I mean, when I did Special Branch, I changed the rehearsals, which were being held like a play. You know, you would rehearse it for a week like a play, and then you'd go on the set and you'd rehearse the scene a couple of times and then shoot it. And I kept on saying, well, you know, why? Let's do it like a film. Get rid of all the, you know, the rehearsals in a room, which I believe they've now done and have done for a long time.
Yeah, I think that, for example, your Doctor Who, each episode you would have a week's rehearsal, tech runs, etc.
Yeah.
Which I suppose had the benefit that you would get to know people quite well, and they would be more
Well,
personal.
in a film, you don't get to
Yeah,
know people
no,
necessarily.
yeah. Do you prefer having the chance to get to know a
No,
company?
I don't.
No.
I much prefer film. I
Hmm.
mean, in this last one, which was which was basically a fluke, which was this young man said, "I want to be a film director," and I thought, "Oh dear, dear." And I said, "Yeah, of course, go for it, Jamie." And then he said, "Look, I've seen a little film. I made a little film in Brighton, and would you come and see it? Tell me what you think." And I thought, "Oh yeah, all right." So I went to see it. I said, "Jamie, you can really direct." Anyway, a bit later, he said, "Well, I've written a film for you." And I thought, "Oh dear, 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 how do we get out of this?" And I said, "Oh, right, Jamie, what do I do?" He said, "You play a drag queen and a cross-dresser."
Hmm.
Anyway, to cut a long story short, it's won 14 international film awards. And when we were in LA, it won the top two, you know, the top two awards. And it's now on Prime. And it's something that I'm very proud of. It's everything I know is in it. Again, you see, in film, you shouldn't really rehearse very much.
Yeah.
I keep on saying to director, shoot the rehearsal. You know, I mean, talking about Tony Curtis in that. Well, and the film I did with Frank Sinatra. Well, Frank Sinatra only did 2 takes, and Tony Curtis was exactly the same. 2 takes. That was no more,
Hmm.
because in that way you create a sparkle that doesn't happen if you rehearse something and rehearse something. That spontaneity lights it all up. And that's why I was basically called One Take Nesbitt for years, because anything more than one is a mistake.
Well, if you think in life, we have one shot at what we say, we don't quite know how we're going to say it. So you keep
Exactly.
that freshness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Frank Sinatra was exactly the same. It was all instinctive, and I loved working with him. It was awe-inspiring because, you know, 1 take and that was it. It was great.
Was he a nice person to know in
He
between?
was an absolutely lovely man. And the problem with as Frank Sinatra was he was the biggest star in the world then, and everybody wanted something out of him. Anyway, so one of the tabloids approached me and said, "Look, would you write a story, or we'll ghost a story about, you know, an English actor working with the biggest star in the world?" And they offered me a lot of money for it, and I said, "No, no, no, I won't do that. That's tacky. I think no, no, no." Anyway, he must have heard that this young English actor had turned down a considerable amount of money, and so I didn't want anything. From that moment, he invited me always for lunch. He invited me all the time. And there's a very famous story, if we have a moment, which I'll tell you
Yeah,
about.
please do. Yes.
We were going to shoot my stuff in Copenhagen. And he said, "Have you ever been to Copenhagen?" I said, "No, Mr. Sinatra, I never have. I've been everywhere else." But he said, "Oh, you'll love it. It's lovely people." Anyway, what happens in film? They didn't shoot in Copenhagen. They changed it to Welwyn Garden City, and so he said, "Looks like you're not going to go to Copenhagen." I said, "No." Well, he said, "Listen, Derren," he said, "go to Copenhagen, have a holiday on me for the 10 days. Take your wife." I said, "Oh, that's no." He said, "No, no, 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 no. You know, I like you." So I took £4,000 with me, because you can't be a schnorrer if Sinatra's going to be doing. So when I was living in the country at the time, and Heathrow on his private jet, don't sit in a sofa on a private jet because you can't find the seat belts. And, you don't want people to think you don't, this is not your normal way of travel. Anyway, so we arrive at Copenhagen, and there is this ghastly white, terrible taste stretch limousine, all awful. Oh. Anyway, then a Mercedes turns up, and the little man in a grey suit comes over, and he said, "Mr. Sinatra welcomes you to Copenhagen," and he handed me a thick manila envelope. So I got in this ghastly white stretch limousine with my first wife, and I opened up the envelope, and it was full of money. I mean, I counted it out, and I said to my wife, I said, we'll never spend this in 10 days. Now, I have been known to spend money. So we went to this amazing place with a private lift, with bedrooms, with the bar full, kitchens and all the rest of it. And we go out that night, and I come back about 4 o'clock in the morning, find a bedroom because there's so many, fall asleep. And about 9 o'clock in the morning, there's this ringing of bells. And you know how you wake up and you can't think where you are. I can't find the front door. So I'm walking through this place. Anyway, I opened the front door, and there's this little man we met at the airport. And he said, "Mr. Sinatra, hopes you had a lovely evening." And I thought, goodness, I hope he doesn't do this every morning. I'd have a sleep. Anyway, he handed me another manila envelope. It wasn't for 10 days. Every day I got the same amount of money in this envelope. So I had money stuffed everywhere, all over, everywhere. And when I got back, I said, "Mr. Sinatra," he says, "No, you're a great actor. I like you. No, did you have a good time?" I said, "Absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much." That's how kind he was. It was actually in his book, one of the books written about him, the story.
Well, that's lovely. It sounds like he was very kind and very humble despite the success,
Well, you see, everybody wanted something out of him. And I'll tell you something which really shouldn't be forgotten, is that afterwards he phoned me when I lived in the country. I had a house that was built in 1401. And the phone rang and then said, "Derren, Sinatra." Oh, goodness, yes, right. He said, "Come over to Grosvenor Square, where he had a flat, actually next door to my best friend's flat." And so I went over there, and he said, "Look, I'm doing a concert at Festival Hall." And I said, "What a stupid thing." I said, "I know I can't get tickets." I mean, what a stupid thing to say. Anyway, he said, "Look, I'll get you tickets, but you have to pay because it's charity." I said, "Fine." He said, "And I'd like you to be my guest at I can't remember the restaurant in the West End, the best one, which I used to go and eat in." And he said, "Would you be my guest on my table at Claridge's afterwards?" And I said, "Yes, I'd love to." Anyway, I saw the show, which was amazing. I mean, really, I spent my life in theaters with music hall and great artists, and he was something. But this is what shouldn't be forgotten. When he came off, I sort of bumped into him, and he looked at me and he said, "Hi, Derren, what did you think of it?" Now, think of this. Here is a man with the fame that very few men will ever achieve again. And he asks a little English actor what he thought. Now, that goes to show that there is an inbuilt humility. And I actually said to him, "You didn't sing the song I really liked." He said, "Which one was that?" I said, "All the women." And he hummed and sang the refrain. And I thought, not many people have had Frank Sinatra just sing the refrain, just for him. But it was lovely because at Claridge's you could have anything at all. And I looked at the menu, and there was a Chateau Margaux. In those days, £1,750 a bottle. And, one could have it if you wanted, but one wouldn't take that liberty. But he sat opposite me with two blondes, which he totally ignored. And there was this beautiful mahogany piano, and his pianist was saying, "Hey, Frank, this is a beautiful piano." And Sinatra said, I can't hear it. And the maitre d' came over. In those days, they wore, I don't know whether they still do, 17th century clothes in Claridge's. Anyway, they unscrewed the lid, took the lid off. The guy played it, and Sinatra said, "Put it on the bill." Amazing man, where money didn't come into it at all.
Yeah.
And about 4 o'clock, he said, "I fancy a pizza." And I never forget, I can see it to this day. Two men dressed in 17th century clothes walked with this huge silver platter with a pizza on it. And he looked at it and he said, "That's a great looking pizza." He cut a little sliver, took it, and that was it. That's all he had. And everybody could have, it wasn't a special menu. It was Claridge's menu, whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
nice
Oh,
man.
yeah, there's lovely, lovely stories. I had a question come in from Frederick. Would you have liked to have written and directed more material? For example, you did the Amorous Milkman. Would you have liked to have done more things like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm funny, really, because I wanted to do it. And when I'd done it, I didn't want to do it anymore. I just sort of said, "Well, yes, I've done it." And, that was enough. I didn't want to do anymore. And for instance, when I did Special Branch, for various reasons, which you may ask me now or at another time, I only did 2 series because I didn't want to be one of these actors who, is in a series until he's, in a wheelchair. I mean, that to me wasn't something I want to do. I never wanted to be in a series, for a long time. And I was able in Special Branch for reasons which might become apparent, because he had to renegotiate my contract for reasons, because he was actually an idiot. Anyway, the producer. And one of the reasons, and one of the contract reasons, was I could get out of get out of it anytime I liked. But I mean, I can tell you about Special Branch.
I think we'll probably come to that later on in the evening. I think. I wanted just to touch on the Persuaders for a moment. You obviously worked with Roger Moore before. How did you get involved with Persuaders?
I was just asked.
Just an agent.
The great organization. I mean, the great organization were family friends. In fact, my mother, when she was a young woman and he was a young man, were a couple. 19 whatever it was, all those years ago. But I never stopped working for him. And a lovely man. I mean, the great organization was great, really great.
Would Lou Grade be on the set, or was he kind of more?
Oh no, never ever.
No,
never ever. You never saw him. I mean, the real man with the brains was Leslie Grade. Lou Grade was the greatest salesman ever. But Leslie would tell him what to sell.
Okay.
And I think that if Lou had to find between Heinz baked beans and Zoom baked beans, he'd choose Zoom, and his brother would say Heinz.
Lou Grade, of course, is known for very expensive, very high quality productions. Was that reflected in the man himself? Was he do you like the finer things? Was he kind of flamboyant?
Well, I mean, I liked him very much, and he smoked cigars, and I smoked cigars, and he, I believe, was a part of my mother's life until quite, for many years.
The episode Persuaders is directed by Leslie Norman. Do you remember Leslie Norman at all?
Yes, I do. I remember him as a very, very proficient man. I believe he was married to, was it not Susan, a very famous American film star. I think you better check on who his wife was. It was either I can't remember. I think she was the fairy redhead.
I will have a little look.
Have a look.
Yes, Elizabeth Crawford, or Crawford. Hang on, Elizabeth Crawford, Crafford.
I can't remember that.
Yes, a lady called Elizabeth. Yeah.
But he was a very, very nice, an English gentleman, really.
Hmm. And of course, his son's very well known in the British film community for being um, Barry Norman, the film critic, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
So you would have first encountered Roger Moore on The Saint, the episode Sporting Chance. Is that?
Yeah, but of course I knew him before, and that's why he was a patron of our company. You know,
So was just somebody that you met in acting
well,
circles?
he was married to a very famous singer in the music halls, and of course, she would be on the bill with my family, and he would turn up, and I would say hello, and all the rest of it. And so that's how we started to know each other. But he was a lovely man. I mean, a really lovely man.
Do you remember much from the episode of The Saint that you did with him? Was it?
No, not at all. I
No.
mean, I was very
Yeah.
fortunate in doing so many that, it was just a job, a work. But I must tell you a story about Roger Moore,
Yeah.
which really goes to show what he was like. Now, remember, I'd known him for many, many years. And I think he was on the set of The Persuaders.
Hmm.
It was a summer's day, and we were sitting outside in the sunlight waiting for the lighting. And so we're just sitting there. And after a while, he turned to me and he says, "You know something, Derren? I'm very good looking." And I looked at him and I thought, you know, uh, yes, yes, you're very good looking. Yeah. I thought, very strange. Anyway, thought no more of it. A little bit later, he said, "Do you know, Derren, I'm very tall." And I said, "Yes, you are. You're very tall. Yes." And I thought, this is extraordinary. And then a bit later, he says, "I'm very suave." And I thought, what on earth is all this? And I said, "Yes, Roger, you're very suave." And then he said, "But one day they're going to find out I can't fucking act." And that was Roger,
Uh,
a lovely man.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think he was very much an underrated actor as well. If you watch The Man Who
Yes,
Haunted
he was. He
Himself,
was. He was.
yeah.
There was no side to him. He realized he was the luckiest man alive,
Mm.
and he told the most filthy gags I've ever heard. Even I had to say to people, "What does that mean?"
We're just seeing the introduction of your character now on screen, which I think is quite a good introduction. One of the other villains is basically when your name is mentioned as a possible choice for the job, he's basically insulting your character, not realizing you're sitting in the chair with your back to him. So I think it's quite a nice little introduction to the character. Um, the Persuaders is a very much a 70s show in terms of its flamboyance and costumes. We had a question from Stephen about your outfit, because it's very nice the flamboyant shirts and how was this very reflective of your own fashion sense and
Well, no,
at
I
the
mean,
time?
for instance, Special Branch was entirely my creation as far as clothing was concerned.
Hmm.
But on that one, it was really the wardrobe handed me whatever I was going to wear, and I wore it.
Oh, good, good. Because I know some actors when they talk about these sort of shows that they sometimes would provide their own costumes because of budgets and things. Sometimes you
No, you
turn
didn't
them,
need to do that.
yeah,
Really, you
yeah.
didn't need to do that with
No.
with a great organization.
Oh,
No.
it's different level, wasn't it, really? Um, I want,
Even on Tucked,
yeah.
the film that won all the awards,
Hmm.
I was handed costumes because I didn't necessarily have evening clothes, except when I was made up as the drag queen. I
Hmm.
looked in the mirror and I thought, "Oh my God, I look like my mother."
Um, I think the Persuaders, as we said about being quite high production values. I know you've had a little look at the show and I sent you the copy of it. Did you get the sense that it was a very well-made production? Do you think it's
It strikes me as being a very the money was
Hmm.
spent. They didn't seem to cut down on anything.
Hmm.
But all the television things one was not aware of cutting corners.
But very different from walking on to Doctor Who in a small studio to something
Well,
like
Doctor Who, it was just a
this.
tiny, studio hidden away from the main studios of the BBC.
I mean, was Doctor Who still quite a nice part for you to do? Was it
It's just
interesting?
business. It's just a job.
Yeah.
No more, no less. Just work.
Oh yeah, yeah. So get in, get out, sort of
Yeah,
thing.
basically.
Yeah. You did a very good episode of Gideon's Way, the Tin God. That was opposite John Hurt. Do you remember John Hurt at
Oh
all?
yes, I do. I remember him very well. Nice man, nice
Yeah.
man.
It's a very nice two-hander episode.
Yes, again, I can hardly remember it at all. Because as
mm,
I said, I was very, very fortunate.
mm,
I mean, I did hundreds of them, although I was never that ambitious.
mm.
To me, it was a job, and I prefer to, enjoy life, as it were. And I was very fortunate, of course.
Were I mean, you said obviously a job was a job, but were certain things more enjoyable? Did you like things that were perhaps a bit more flamboyant, or things that are a bit more
Well,
gritty?
one never thinks of it in that way. One tries to recreate reality,
Mhm.
and so that is what one is concentrating on, and to do, if you please yourself, one doesn't want to please others. You primarily you think, did that click?
Mm.
Did it click?
Yeah. I know you don't like to watch your stuff very much, but at the time, would you have had a little look at what you did just to kind
No,
of sort of no?
no,
Um,
no. I never watched
no.
ever, except Tucked,
Except that, yeah, yeah,
except that
yeah.
which I, that's the meaning of the game. That film.
Mm.
That's a movie.
Oh yes, yeah, I mean, we will get to talking about that in a
Yeah.
bit of detail in a bit. So you've guested on so many shows. Is it always fun to guest on a new show, or can it sometimes be a bit, what am I walking into? Can or is it
No,
actually
not
fun?
really,
Yeah,
because I could read the script beforehand, and if I didn't like it, I wouldn't do it.
right. Yeah.
I mean, I was very fortunate because, as I said, my family were, you know, very famous, and they'd earned a great deal of money.
Mm.
And I started a company with my little brother called Our Price Records, which people might remember, but
Right.
that's another
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was still going when I was when I was young. I think I'd be cool. We might be one in Exeter somewhere.
Yes,
I think. So you were kind of able to sort of pick and choose a bit, perhaps in the way that others
absolutely.
wouldn't have. I mean, would it have always been the script that appealed, or would it be, oh, John Hurt's in this, Roger Moore's
No,
in
no,
this?
John Hurt was unknown.
No, or well, was or somebody that you did kind
I
of,
didn't even know he was going to be in it.
yeah, yeah. Would it
But
sometimes
you
be,
read the script and you think, yes,
yeah, yeah.
that sounds good.
And sometimes the names attached, like Frank Sinatra. Do you
Oh
think,
well,
well,
then of course,
better, you can't turn that
yeah,
down,
then
can
of
you
course.
really?
And I'm tell you what, in the Persuaders, I was very keen to see how Tony Curtis worked,
Hmm.
because I knew that he too was this instantaneous actor, and I was very interested to see how he worked.
I got a feeling he never did the same take. Well, as you said, he didn't get a couple of takes, but he would always do something different.
Every time, and indeed, you know, I think I did a few scenes with him, and they weren't really scripted
Right.
as such.
Yeah. And I know some actors don't like it when people go off script, but I think I get a sense
Well,
that you
I've
quite
always
like.
done that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been dear Bill Kenwright, who was my best friend for 50 years,
Hmm.
used to say to me, "This evening, Derren, how many lines of the author did you say?" Well,
Yeah.
because it's spontaneous. One one doesn't say the same thing over and over again. It's the meaning which is the important thing. The meaning, not the words, the meaning.
Yeah. Oh, of course. One of your earlier film credits, A Night to Remember. Do you have any? Does that stick in your mind, that
Yes,
film?
I do. It was absolutely freezing cold. And one of the actors who became very famous as a BBC detective, and it was absolutely freezing cold. And they kept on throwing cold buckets of water over us.
Mm.
And so it wasn't a very nice feeling.
Right. And of course,
Kenneth Moore was walking around
yeah.
underneath, who had a wetsuit underneath his uniform. So he was boiling hot.
And directed by Roy Ward Baker, of course, it did a lot of The Saint and things like that. So do you remember Roy Ward Baker at all?
How do you mean? Sorry.
Oh, the director of Night to Remember, Roy Ward Baker.
Yes, yes, very, very, peripherally, because I didn't have I had nothing in it really.
Yeah, and I suppose with a lot of shows you don't necessarily remember the directors as long as they're proficient and they do.
Well, the thing is, one of the troubles being an actor are directors, and there are very few directors whom one particularly admires, because the real director is the man who comes to a scene, like for instance in Where Eagles Dare, Brian Hutton, and he'll say, oh right, shall we have a little look at the scene, and the scene would play out, and then he'd hear it and he'd decide how to shoot it. But those kind of directors are very far between. The other ones, which are the really ones that you don't like, are the ones who know how it's going to be shot before the scene has been played between actors. And it's miles apart. And so the main problem with an actor is the conflict that one has with directors.
Right, I see. Yeah. I will mention this show because again, a lot of people watching will be interested in a lot of these kind of era shows. Man in the Suitcase. Do you recall?
That was a great little film.
Right. Yeah.
That was one of the earliest films. And the director of that, whose name I've forgotten, but he used to be the sound man for Gainsborough Pictures. He was a very fine man, and he was again would let you do what you wanted to do.
Right.
He would watch and maybe but that was a lovely film. A lovely film.
Richard Bradford, of course, was the star of that particular show. Do you remember Richard Bradford?
Who?
A gentleman called Richard Bradford. He played the lead in
Richard Bradford.
Yeah, Man in the Suitcase.
Oh no, I thought you meant the film I made. No, Richard Bradford was an absolute arsehole.
Oh.
I mean, he was one of these false method actors. And to give you an idea, I'd done hundreds of fight things. Anyway, there was, I knew all the stuntmen so well. And he threw a punch and hit one of the stuntmen, broke his tooth. No, you don't do that. You're an amateur. And, I thought to myself, here is a very, very bad method actor, which I believe he was. In fact, I said to the director, I am not going to be anywhere near this man. If I have to chase him and he through a garden gate and he slams the garden gate, I want a double, because, I don't think he knows what he's doing. I wasn't very popular, but to hell with it.
Well, you got to feel safe on of course, and so.
Well, I mean, the fight scenes, they're an art, and and you've got to be, behave yourself. You've got to know what you're doing, and you've got to be able to hold back. But he didn't know what to do. He was one of these what I call phony method actors.
Right.
But I did a film called Man in the Back Seat.
Yes, I'll just have a look at that. Yes, Man in the
that
Back
was
Seat.
the one.
Yeah.
That was a lovely film.
That was Vernon Sewell.
Vernon Sewell, that's right. He had a motor yacht. Vernon Sewell had this huge motor yacht, and I had a huge sailing yacht, and the two never met, but we used to have fun.
I think Carol White was one of your co-stars.
Yes, she was. Yeah.
Was she nice?
Yeah, she's a lovely, lovely girl.
Okay, wonderful. The main villain, well, apart from yourself in the episode, is Patrick Troughton.
Yes,
Do you
I knew
remember?
him too. He was a
Yeah.
very nice man. He
Hmm.
was in Doctor. He played Doctor Who, didn't he?
Yeah, just after William Hartnell, a couple of years after you did yours.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But he was a very. I mean, actors are pretty good. In fact, if you're the good actors are nice. The bad actors are really usually assholes.
Hmm.
They're the good ones. Are easy.
I often find when I do these events that almost the bigger the name, like yourself, that they're really lovely and they're easy to talk
Well,
to.
yeah. I
One
mean,
of-
but I must tell you a story about Tony Curtis.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
We were sitting there and again waiting for everything.
Hmm.
And I don't know how it came up. It was the most embarrassing things that had ever happened to people. And he said, "Oh, I had a most terrible, embarrassing thing in Hollywood once." He said, "I was invited to some multi-millionaire lady, Bloomberg or someone or other, and she had this vast house in Hollywood with this huge entrance hall with the staircases going up, and there's this big party." And she said, "Are you interested in China and things?" And he said, "Well, yes, I am." And she showed him, all the Picassos and the Renoirs, and they went into the Chinese, porcelain. And she handed him this small porcelain jug, and he dropped it. He dropped it, and it broke. And he thought, "Oh my God." And she said, "Don't worry, it's insured, and they've got another one at the Metropolitan Museum." Anyway, he said, "I couldn't sleep. What am I going to do? How am I going to say sorry?" And so I couldn't sleep. So the next morning I got up. He had a Continental Rolls Royce open thing. And I drove to the big florist in Hollywood and I bought this huge bouquet of flowers. And I drove back to this vast house, knocked on the door, and the butler, and I said, "May I speak with Mrs. Bloomberg or whatever her name was?" And he said, "Mr. Curtis, do come inside." And he went inside and he said, there was this huge hall with these huge seats all around, red, big, big seats. And I'm holding this big bouquet of flowers and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. And I think, well, I'll sit down. So he sat on one of these chairs and he heard, and he killed her miniature dog who was asleep on one of the chairs. So he looked, put the flowers on top of the dead dog and ran out. And, and anyway, but there's a second bit to this story because, as I said, one of my best friends had his London house in Grosvenor Square, and he had a big yacht, and he invited us to be on the yacht for a month or so. And on the yacht was a man, an American man, who had something to do with Peter O'Toole. I can't remember what, maybe a manager or whatever it was. Anyway, I was relating this story one evening over dinner, and everybody thought it was the funniest thing ever. And then a few months later, I'm watching O'Toole on television, and the bastard said it was him. It happened to him. But O'Toole was always like that. I was rather with him. He always was a wild Irishman, which the truth didn't necessarily mean very much to him. But I thought, you bastard, that's Tony Curtis. Didn't
Yeah.
happen to you.
Oh, so that's a great story. What's interesting about this episode is that if there's an exterior with where they're pulling up to a house or something, um, Roger Moore's always there, but Tony doesn't. Oh, it's always a double. So there seem to be certain things that Tony wouldn't perhaps do on the show. I know that Tony Curtis struggled a bit doing the Persuaders because he'd been a very big film star up to this point, and he felt TV was a bit kind of on the way
I'm not
down kind of
sure.
thing.
I'm not sure of that.
No?
I mean, he was really the most underestimated. I mean, he really was a genius. And I did make inquiries about this to certain people in from Hollywood, not actors, but like head of wardrobes and this, that, and the other. And one of them said to me, well, yes, one of the problems with him was he had such a hard time getting up the ladder, and people were so bad to him that when he became very famous, he became rather bad to people in power. And I think that might have had something to do with the fact that he never really, I mean, some like it hot is genius. And I think that might be the reason. But I never got any feeling that, he seemed to be full of life and fun.
And obviously Roger only did one series. They did one series because Roger ended up doing the Bond films after. But Tony Curtis was more than willing to do another series. They thought of
Yeah,
recasting Roger, so he's obviously quite
yeah,
happy with the product.
yeah,
But you're right in terms of the authority. There was a gentleman called Johnny Goodman who was in charge of production, and their relationship was always very rocky. So it may have been this because I don't like authority either. I always kind of a bit
yeah,
afraid of what they'll do, you know.
yeah.
So I can understand why Tony might have been the same sort of thing. So that's an interesting perspective. Um, the other henchman I want to mention in this episode is a gentleman called Kenneth Warren, who plays Werner. Sort
Yeah,
of,
Kenneth Warren, I knew
yeah,
Kenneth as well. He died relatively early, I think.
he did unfortunately, yes.
Yes, yes, I remember Kenneth. I mean, a very good actor, strong actor.
He's one of those faces that appears in so many of these sort of shows at the time.
Yes, yes, he did.
Yeah,
Yes, he did.
and I think he has very good chemistry with yourself and Patrick Troughton. They seem to be very good, sort of,
Yeah.
you know, bouncing off each other very well.
Yeah.
Um,
I
what,
mean,
what,
another show that the grades closed down
hmm.
was the Prisoner,
Oh yes, yep. Mhm.
because there's a long story about that. Because I was supposed to be the permanent number two,
Mm,
because it was the grades money, and George Markstein was the creator of it.
mm,
And he said, but McGowan won't have you. He won't have you. He won't have that opposition. And not only that, but he then decided not to have any opposition from anybody playing number two. And George Markstein said, well, I mean, where do all these number twos come from? Where do all these number twos go?
mm.
Anyway, so I won't tell you the argument that McGowan and I had, but the grade organization closed it down because they couldn't stand him. He was, in my opinion and in many other people's opinions, he was around the twist doing that show.
Mm.
I mean, he was one of the ones they asked to play Bond, but he turned it down because he wouldn't kiss a woman. Annette Andre, a lovely girl, she used to say to me, there's nothing there. You can't get any reaction from him.
Mm. Of course, you did a couple of I think you did a Danger Man with him a few years prior. Was he
Yeah,
any
we never got on
different?
pretty. We never got on too well doing that.
Yeah, it was always the same from because I know the production with The Prisoner was very hellish, and the series is the conclusion of the series is very rushed because of course it was, as you say, it was cancelled. So,
Well, it
but
was
yeah.
cancelled because
Mm,
George Markstein, who was the man
mm,
who did it, couldn't stand McGowan. I mean, he couldn't.
mm,
What's he doing?
yeah.
What is all this? It's rubbish. It's anyway. He walked out.
Mm.
And in fact, he said to me, "Look, I'm doing another show after this, the special branch. Would you play the lead in it for me?"
Mm,
And I said, "Yeah, fine, love to."
mm. In the Persuaders, of course, it's filmed at Pinewood Studios. They use the lovely gardens of Manor House quite a lot. But was Pinewood Studios quite a nice place to work?
Pinewood,
Yeah.
yes, it was. Of course, the main house was lovely, and they used that some of the time, and they used the stables some of the time. But the studios themselves were really very pleasant.
Hmm.
And there was a doorman there who always used to greet you. Good morning, Mr. Nesbitt. How are you?
Oh, that's lovely. Do you think studios have become less personal nowadays? Because of
Well, I
course,
think so.
yeah.
I mean, they lost their power because films really began to be more on location. totally on location. I mean, Where Eagles Dare was basically totally on location, and there were a few big scenes in Pinewood, like the big scene at the end. But 90% of it was on location. Whereas before, films were not all on location. And of course, the studios, you had to find a studio.
And we're just sort of watching. There's a lovely fight scene that you have with Roger Moore and Tony Curtis. Did you like doing stunts? Of course, we've already touched on it a little bit, but assuming that everybody was professional, was it always good to do action?
Oh yeah, fine, no problem at all. No, I did a film though with Rod Taylor, and we had a real fight. It was the only film that was a real fight. And I must say that actually at the end of it, we became very good friends. In fact, it was Christmas time. I invited him over to my house to spend Christmas. Anyway, so it was the first day's filming, and it was a huge scene, fight scene, underneath Wimbledon tennis courts. It was supposed to be summertime. It was November. Anyway, this actor came up to me and he said, and he was poking me, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to do a fight scene. Do you want to double?" And he kept on poking me. And I thought, I don't like this guy poking me on the shoulder. And of course, all the stuntmen were standing around. And I'd known for years, and we'd thrown each other balconies and goodness knows what. Anyway, he said, "Look," he said, "I do all my own fight scenes. Listen, do you want to double? Can you handle it?" Poking me. And I said, "Yeah, I can handle it." I could see the stuntman thinking, Derren doesn't like this man. So we worked out the fight scene. And I was supposed to run down a corridor. He runs after me, grabs me by the back, throws me against a wall, and then hits me in the stomach. And then I hit him on the chin and this, that, and the other. So, okay, he said, "You sure you can handle this?" I said, I think so. I can handle it. So they say action. And I run and he grabs me. And I thought, oh, no, you don't grab like that. And he threw me against a concrete wall. And I thought, no, you don't throw me that hard against the concrete wall. And then I thought, now the next punch is going to be in my stomach. So I held my stomach really tight, and he hit me in the stomach. My eyes watered, and I thought to myself, this guy is an amateur. And then I thought, right, now it's my turn, because I'm supposed to hit him on the chin. Now I'm going to hit him on the chin. He's going to go down. I'm going to say, sorry, I've made a mistake. He'll be taken to hospital. And I say, no, boom, boom, boom. So I went down from here and I went, pow, right on his chin. He swiveled around, went to the floor, and I was about to say, oh, sorry. So he got up. He got up and he hit me. And then I hit him. And we went down the stairs, hitting each other as hard as we could. At the bottom of the stairs was a wooden shack that they sold ice cream to in the summer. Well, he hit me and I went through it. And then we were sitting on the floor, bleeding. And he said, "Derren." I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm sorry." He said, "I got a cold." I said, "It's all right. All right." And the director, I forget his name now, was a very nice little man. He said, "Oh, yeah, that was very good, very good. I wonder, could we do it again a little bit slower?" And Rod Taylor said, "Oh, fuck off." And after that, actually, we became very good friends. But he was the toughest man I ever knew, and the biggest drinker I ever knew. And I've known a few, like Richard Burton. My God, he could drink anything. When he stayed for me for Christmas, he drank. You wouldn't say to him, "Would you like a whiskey?" You say, "Would you like a whiskey?" You say, "Yeah," and you give him the bottle. Give him the bottle. You could drink anything after anything. Whiskey, gin, whatever.
And that was the Ron Taylor film. That was the High Commissioner, wasn't it? That was
High Commissioner.
Yeah.
I think he died very old. I think had he not drunk, he probably lived to about 150.
Yeah, probably. Ralph Thomas was director.
Ralph Thomas, that's it. Ralph dear old Graf. I wonder, could we do that a little slower?
So it's quite a good film to be on, you know, the fighter side and everything. It was,
Yeah, yeah.
enjoyed it. Christopher Plummer, of course, was in that one. Do you remember Christopher Plummer?
No, I don't. I don't think we ever worked
Didn't
on
work
the
together.
same.
Yeah.
same.
One director I did want to mention, just because I'm a big fan of his work, Sidney J. Furie. He did the film with Frank Sinatra. Do you remember him?
Well, yes, I do indeed. There is a great number of stories about that. Now, he behaved very badly. Sidney Furie behaved very, very badly. So Sinatra, it was his company, and so he shot the film, all the scenes that he was in, and then he left. And Sidney Furie said, "Derren, are you doing anything?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I just want to do some extra shots." And he shot a completely different film to the one that Sinatra thought he had in the can. And it ruined him because Sidney Furie hardly worked again after The Naked Runner, because the word was out, because Sinatra was so, how dare he shoot another film which had no bearing on the original, or very little bearing on the original.
Yes, so Sidney Furie went on to do obviously a number of his last major film, I think, was Superman 4, and that wasn't his fault in terms of that not working out. He
But
worked
if
the
you look at
Canon.
his career
Yeah.
after, and it really doesn't happen.
It was all sort of B movies with Canon Studios, which
Yeah,
of course
yeah.
Canon Films
And he had a
were
great
very cheap.
talent. He had a great talent. I think he needed a producer just to hit him over the head and just say, behave yourself and shoot the movie.
Yeah, I don't think anybody could deny this, how wonderful the Ipcress file is, for example. Of course, that's what's one of his. I've had a question from Ian. You did a terrific spy thriller with Stanley Baker called Innocent Bystanders.
Oh, yes.
Was that good? And what was Baker like in the fight?
Well, Stanley Baker again was a very difficult man, and we had a jiu-jitsu fight. And again, rather like Rod Taylor, he kept on hitting me, and so I hit him back, and he sort of went down. But he wasn't a strong man. You know, you thought to yourself, this is a very tough guy, but he was a difficult actor.
Right.
Known as a difficult actor.
Yeah, yeah. Stephen has asked, you've played many memorable villains in your career. Do you enjoy playing villains? Is there something interesting about a villain?
Well, no, I mean, they're usually more interesting. And you don't have to play a villain. You don't have to play a villain because what he does is villainous. So you don't have to do very much except become him. You know, become him. And, they don't wear black hats and black armbands and sneer and do all the rest of it just to be a villain. What you're doing, your situation, what you're saying, the situation is enough. You don't have to do any more other than be real. So I don't think of them as villains. They're people.
Yeah. So you're kind of finding the humanity of the person.
You're just people. You're people.
Yeah. Because villains never think of themselves as villains, do they? They think they're doing the right thing, or there's a number of quite complex.
You see many actors playing villains, and they sneer and their face crinkles up. But if you look at human beings, they don't use their face muscles very much at all.
No.
Because they're thinking. And that's the name of the game. You don't have to crinkle your face up because you're actually thinking.
Yeah. And did you have a favorite villain that you played, one that was particularly memorable?
Well, I liked Where Eagles Dare.
Yeah, that's a very good one.
I liked that. That was nice. I liked Victim. That was again very nice. But all the others, I can't really think of anything.
You never felt yourself a bit sort of stereotyped in terms of playing villains? You never kind of felt that you, oh, this is a bit, I like
Well,
to talk
whatever
about
came
that.
up, if I liked it, it
Yeah.
made no difference. I
Hmm.
mean, I was very, very fortunate because I didn't need to do it. I mean, I think that can be a bit of a disadvantage. You don't necessarily need
Hmm.
to always work.
Yeah, yeah. So it allowed you to be more choosy, and I
Well,
suppose
yes, I mean, it's probably
yeah.
not good for one's,
Mm,
for ambition,
mm,
but I've enjoyed, I like traveling. I used to like traveling to Europe and living life, not necessarily stuck in a theater. Which I mean, I was born in the theater. I spent all my first 6 years standing at the side of a stage, watching wonderful, famous actors, and I mean musical stars,
mm,
which was amazing.
mm. So you've done quite a bit of theatre work over your
Oh,
career.
hundreds of plays,
Yeah.
and
Um,
I do enjoy them. I mean, I did enjoy them, but it's a completely different kettle of fish.
mm,
In a film, you think it. In a
yeah.
play, you present it.
Mm. I know a lot of actors I talk to, they almost say that they prefer their theatre roles because you're doing something night after night. You can change. You can make things a bit more subtle, a bit more bit.
Well, you can do, but
Yeah.
I could only do a play for a year,
Mm.
and then it would drive me stark raving mad. How can you be fresh
Well, yeah.
for a year, anything more
Mm,
than a year?
mm,
You know, and in a film, you know him that you're playing, and you don't have to tune things. In a theater, all right, I suppose, but how can you be fresh every night? How can you walk on that stage as if it's the very first time and it's
mm,
reality? You say to yourself before coming on, well, I've come from home, or I've got on a bus, or I've got on a taxi, and I walk on, and you walk on. And when you walk off, you're going somewhere. So how you can't keep on doing that
mm,
freshly every night?
yeah.
I mean, I remember going when I was at RADA, I heard that in Moscow they were doing the Three Sisters, Stanislavski's production of the Three Sisters, and so I went to Moscow, and I sat in the audience with the book, The Three Sisters, and I watched the Moscow arts, and I was a very young actor, and I thought, this is it. This is exactly what I believe in, and this is why I was having such trouble in RADA with teachers, because my way of doing things were completely different. Although I must admit, I must have been doing something right to have won everything at the end of the time.
Yeah. They had a question coming from Gonzalo. What do you remember from filming The Blue Max with George Peppard,
Yeah,
Sharon?
George Peppard was a nice man. What I remember there is, I remember the director being a complete asshole because he cut everything, all the story to make all the flying.
Mm,
And I think people didn't realize what on earth was going on because he cut all the story off. But there was one famous incident. They said, "Can you fly?" I couldn't fly, one of these planes, although I did learn to fly. And it was a recreation of First World War plane. And it's right up here, and the throttle is over there. And anyway, so the Irish pilots said, Derren, I'm going to teach you how to taxi. I said, yeah, I'm going to teach you how to taxi. So I said, yes. Okay. He said, what you must remember, never let the joystick touch your balls because you'll take off. I said, absolutely. No way. So anyway, so I learned how to taxi. And we had this huge scene. There was George Peppard, and he was going to be pulled off. There was me, who was going to taxi. There was Jeremy Kemp, who was going to taxi. And then all the Irish pilots in the planes would take off. and all the big scene with all the planes flying around, all the troops and everything. So it took hours to make it, put it all together. And of course, George had nothing to do all day. He was drunk, absolutely drunk. And so I'm sitting there with this plane, thumping, thumping, and George is over there. And I hear one of them say, "What are we going to do about George?" And they said, "What?" And the cameraman said, "His eyes are crossed." So they said, "Put goggles on him." So they put goggles on him. And okay, so now they've said action. George was pulled off. Red flag, I was supposed to go. Well, I didn't give it enough power to move. The director called me everything under the sun. He called me pieces of female anatomy, which I don't have. Anyway, so stop, stop it. And everybody started taking off, and the planes were taking, stop. Anyway, so finally they got everything back together again. Hours later, I'm get with the same suit, and I hear that, "What are we going to do about George?" Because now his head is down. He was basically unconscious. So they said, "Well, get a scarf and tie his scarf around the back of the seat." So they've tied the seat. So he's got goggles on, unconscious, sitting upright, off. So now instead of giving a little thing, I give it full. Oh my God. I go off. The stick comes into me balls and I'm going up. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going up. So I'm going down, going up, going down. Jeremy Kemp saw what happened the first time, saw what happened the second time. He went off, but kicked the rudder, went left, and took all the propellers off. So it was a bit of a famous scene.
Hmm.
And I got out of it because I kicked the rudder and the wing came off. And so it was all right. George had no idea what had gone on. So if you
And it
see
was,
that, that
yeah.
shot with George with a scarf, his goggles and hat on, he was actually unconscious.
It makes watching the film a different experience after knowing that.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was very funny because they did this wonderful scene where the First World War, and it was absolutely wonderfully recreated. And it was pouring with rain, and they had the Irish Army. And I was walking past, and these soldiers were sitting in the rain, in the mud, one dressed as an Englishman, one dressed as a German. And I heard the Irishman said, "You know something? If they pay me £2 a day, I'm not coming back."
It was John Gilliman, the director of
Oh
that
yes, he
film.
was.
Yeah.
He was, shall we say, not a favourite of
No.
anybody's.
No.
In fact, he was a prick.
Yes, it does sound like one.
Yeah.
You would have encountered. Did you encounter Tony Curtis on Monte Carlo or Bust? Did you kind of?
Not really.
Not really.
No, not really, because he was. We didn't do it. That was with Jack Hawkins, wasn't it?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, well, of course, poor Jack Hawkins had this throat cancer, and in Rome, no one would sit with him at lunch, but I did. I sat with him because I remember once years ago he said to me, "Derren, do you want to know something about film acting?" And I said, "Yes, I would." He said, "Find a seat and fall asleep." He's absolutely right.
Hmm.
But no one would sit with him. They were embarrassed.
Well, I suppose they didn't know what to say to him, or was
Well, I
it?
think so.
Yeah.
I think they were embarrassed. A lot of
Hmm.
people are embarrassed by very serious illness. And I mean, what a tragedy. What a wonderful voice. I mean, what a wonderful voice.
Yeah.
A wonderful
Yeah.
actor. Tragic.
Yeah.
Of course, what people don't realize, is I'm being asked to do something for the BBC on Richard Burton. And I'm going to find that very difficult because I admired Richard Burton very much. But there were many things about him that were really a tragedy. He was a man that was really like a Greek tragedy. The true story of Richard Burton is one of tragedy. And I won't go into it with you now because it's things that I witnessed myself, which made me believe that this terrible inferiority complex, no matter what, no matter all the fame, no matter all the money, no matter all the women, the most beautiful, order, once that's in there, it can never be erased. And the terrible upbringing he had, I admired him very much, but I mean, I think it was 40 years ago this year that he drank himself to death. The true story, which nobody really knows, is a Greek tragedy. I always felt desperately sorry for him. Why drink? And when he was slightly sober, no one was at home. He had no personality. It was really a tragic, tragic story.
Yeah, there's so many actors that have the same, isn't it? I don't know whether sometimes it's the pressure of the spotlight or the attention or just the insecurity to become an actor and kind of want
Well, I mean, my friend
recognition.
Peter O'Toole was a great example of that. Which was all of the drink again. Again, he died quite old, and again, had he not drank and taken drugs, he probably would have lived to 120. But I knew him very well.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. You did a couple of episodes of The Protectors with Robert Vaughan. Do you remember Robert Vaughan?
Oh, Robert Vaughan, very nice man.
Yeah.
Yes, very, very nice man. In fact, I was going to New York and I asked him where to stay. And he said, you don't want to stay at some of the boom, 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 boom. He said, but stay here. It's a lovely hotel. And I stayed there. It was a beautiful hotel. He was very nice. He wanted to be a politician, Politics was everything to him.
Yeah. He became a doctor, didn't he?
I don't know.
I think it was I'm not quite sure what doctorate it was in, but yes, he was very concerned about the Vietnam War in the 60s and
yes,
was very sort of interested
I
in
always thought that he would, but he never did.
Yes, I suppose a lot of actors we think would make good politicians because they're very good at
well, I don't know. I mean, you have to be honest.
Yeah.
As a politician, and not like Trump, who's lied 40,000 times.
Well, yes. I know Robert Vaughan liked to be in the UK a lot, and he always would stay at the Ritz when he was doing theatre, or
yeah,
he had a good taste for the finer things.
Yes, and Cary Grant lived in the Connaught. Give you a story actually about the inherent, when something is inherent. I was in Berlin, and one of the heads of the studio, well, not one of the heads of studio, one of the heads of department of wardrobe, and we was chatting in a caravan, and it was pounding with rain, and he was saying Cary Grant, who was then married to the richest woman in the world, he himself had a lot of money, and when his shirts were worn, he would have the collar turned, and then when there was going to throw the shirt away, he'd cut off all the buttons and keep them. But it was the terrible poverty that he suffered from. In fact, this man, Warner Brother, I think, he said, if Cary Grant, James Stewart, and I can't remember the other one, Charlton Heston, had lunch, they'd all be sitting there in the evening because no one would pick up the bill. But it goes to show Cary Grant, of all the wealth, of all the fame, had that meanness, because you can't get rid of it when it is inherent and you've suffered, just as Richard Burton could never get over that inferiority complex, no matter what. The handsome, wonderful voice, amazing presence, and yet would be drinking. You think, why? He was ferocious with women. When he married the most beautiful woman in the world, it didn't make him feel superior. So he drank even more. And we met her, by the way. What a lovely lady. We thought, oh, we have to be very careful with her. Down to earth, absolutely beautiful. I mean, lovely. And of course, it didn't happen because I think people might agree with me that when Burton started making films, he really wasn't a very good film actor. And he's married to one of the greatest scream actresses in the world. and he had to learn from her. So that didn't help, you know, because I mean, I won't go into it well very much. He said to me one day, because I was sitting in my father's Rolls Royce, because I drove it around because he didn't drive and my mother never drove. So I drove it to Rod and I drove it to the Ovic. And one day I said, look, I'll take your car broke down. I live in Avenue Road. You live in Haverstock Hill. Anyway, so he said, you got a car? I said, no, I don't know. My father has a car. Got in the Rolls Royce. I said, no, they've been stars since 1928. And he sat down. He said, I can't afford one of these. And I said, I think pretty soon you will. And he said, I've had all this Shakespeare business. I'm going to earn money. I'm going to earn real money. And I thought, why tell me? Why try to, be superior to me? I mean, why? And then he behaved extremely badly. A young actor who waiting to go on. He's playing, Henry V, and he is the biggest star. I mean, had the world at his feet now. I mean, the fame and the building of fame. This young actor said to me, I've been out of work for 18 months and now my wife and said, the business has given you up. And 18 months is a long time to be out of work. Richard Burton walked past, went up to him and he said, I can't understand anybody being out of work for 18 months. I've never been out of work a day since I started. Now that destroyed this young actor. And I thought, why? Why boost yourself? Why boost? Why need to boost yourself when the whole of London is talking about you, when you have the world at your feet? Why be so ferocious with women? To make yourself the superior man. And then when he made money, it didn't help. So he drank more. When he married the most beautiful woman in the world, it didn't make him superior. He drank more and more and more until he drank. So the true story is a tragedy, because when he was slightly sober, he had no personality. You admired someone very much. And a Greek tragedy, the true story is a Greek tragedy.
I think they said about Peter Sellers. He always had to hide behind a character, and he always thought himself was quite boring if he didn't have somebody to kind of sort of lose himself in. And I think I've known a lot of people I know a few people that are quite wealthy, and it's but maybe didn't start off that, but they were always insecure about money, but that then continues with them, so they're very tight or they're very concerned about it. It comes up a lot in comments.
In my experience, I mean, my best friend who's now dead was a multimillionaire, but his family were millionaires. And I've always found that people who have been born with money are generally very pleasant. The ones who make money can be sometimes rather difficult.
Yes, yeah. I'm just going back to another audience question.
Sure.
You would work with Roger later on the film Bullseye with Michael Caine. Was that nice?
I do. Who worked with who?
With Roger Moore on Bullseye. Also had Michael Caine
Yeah.
in that
Well,
one.
George, Winner was a very problematical actor. I mean, director.
I have heard, yes.
I mean, there was a story that a light boom had fallen on and killed Winner, and 47 members of the crew admitted to the crime. But it was very funny because Roger Moore and Michael and both of them. Winner would say things like, "Boom, man, what the fuck are you doing? Move the boom, don't remember." And Roger Moore would say, "What are you doing? Move the bloody boom, boom, boom," and would send them up. Send them up. And I said afterwards, "Why did you?" He said, "No, I'm not going to have that nonsense on the set." He said, "We decided, both of us, to send them up," and that's what they did.
Roger Moore's daughter, Deborah Moore, was in that film as well, and of course Deborah did make a little appearance in The Persuaders when she was about 8 or 9 as a little schoolgirl. Did you remember Deborah Moore at all? His daughter?
No, not at all.
No. But what was Michael Caine quite nice as a?
Oh yeah, he was a gentleman. A gentleman.
Yeah.
Although we never actually worked together. Apart from that little bit. But he was a very nice man. I met him in various other situations.
Just to start sort of closing off on our Persuaders discussion, so many of these series, The Persuaders, The Saint, Danger Man, Prisoner, are very iconic shows. Why do you think that they last the test of time? Why do generation after generation
I think
fans
because
buy these
I
things?
think because they're actually unique in what they do. Um, they don't pretend to be anything else other than entertainment, I think, and
Yeah.
that might be the reason.
And they're sort of very sort of family friendly shows in a way you could all
Yes,
ages can watch them
of
as
course. Again, my dear friend who died, Bill Kenwright, he loved the that thing on television, that show old things. I can't remember the which program it is, but they show old things. And that was basically his favorite. He used to phone me up and say, I've just seen you in something in 19.
yeah. Yeah, there's lots of shows, television stations like Great TV in the UK that are always showing The Persuaders or
Yes, and,
the
and
same.
uh, he
Talking
loved those
Pictures
shows. He
T
loved them.
Talking Pictures TV.
That's the one. That's the
Yeah,
one. Talking
yeah,
pictures.
yeah.
That's the one.
Mm. So of course you've had such a wide-ranging and successful career, such a long career as well. How much do these shows play a part in terms of your fans? Do you get a lot of
I have
attention for
no
shows like
idea.
this? Yeah.
Sometimes I go, rarely, but I go to signings.
Mm.
And I really like going to signings because I come across people
Mm.
who have watched me and I had no idea that they were getting pleasure. So it's lovely to see people who come over and say, "Oh, I came back from school and boom, 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 boom," and I had no idea that one was giving pleasure.
Mm.
It was just work.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that what one was doing, and how the public, many members of the public liked it.
Yeah. I've heard a story with Tom Baker when he did Doctor Who, where he was stopped in the street by a fan who was an adult but watched him when he was a child, and he grew up in an orphanage and they didn't have anything, and it was a very sort of bleak existence.
Yeah,
And then Doctor Who would come on Saturday nights, and for that half an hour every week, he would
yeah,
enjoy it. And when of course he met Tom, he
yes,
kind of burst into tears telling him this,
yeah,
and I think we all, if we have a bad time in our lives or a bad day, we get home and we put on The Persuaders or The Prisoner,
yeah.
and you, so as a somebody involved with the show, suddenly are then become there's a goodwill towards people involved in it because
And
it's
and,
so
and
important.
it's really nice. I mean, I really don't go onto Facebook, but Tucked came up,
Hmm.
and people have watched it. And I must say, I go on Facebook and I look at what people say, you know, and you think, my goodness me, they love it. They say things, and so I get a great feeling of warmth when I read the reaction that people have had and what they say. I find that, because even with Tucked, one was just concentrating on being. And when I was in Hollywood, I mean, the critics were so amazingly kind.
Hmm.
And, that gave you a great feeling of, you know, it's really been worth it. I really think it might have been worth it.
Yeah. I watched Tucked a couple of days ago, just rewatched it in preparation for our chat, and it is a most remarkable film, I have to say. It's I
Thank you.
engrossed by it.
Thank
It
you.
it must have been obviously quite a challenge when you first sort of saw the script. Did you think this is going to test my chops
Yeah,
here?
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And Jamie Patterson is an extremely good director. And he got signed when we were in Hollywood. He got signed by one of the biggest agents for directors. So hopefully he will make a big career of himself.
Hmm,
But that film, everything I know is in there.
yeah. And your character, he says at one point that one of the reasons why he does the drag performances is that it's kind of another bit like an actor, a character that he could disappear in, that he finds some confidence in. Did you find when you put on the outfit and the wig that it kind of gave you confidence in the performance?
Well, you just became him,
Hmm.
and you do a performance in this dingy nightclub,
Hmm.
and of course most of it was one take. I mean, 99% of it was one take, if not the rehearsals.
Because I take it's probably something that's so kind of outside perhaps your comfort zone. Did it take you a little bit of time to kind of get into it and
I
find
found
the
it
person?
extremely comfortable.
Hmm. Yeah.
I found everything I've done comfortable.
Hmm.
I mean, even that major in the SS.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think what's interesting is, of course, in the Persuaders, you're playing another German who probably
Yes,
was probably in the Second World War. So you seem to be sort of, for an English actor, drawn to well, Alan Rickman, of course, played Hans Gruber, and there's
yes.
something about British actors that seem to make good villains, I think. Um,
Well, we just tried to do our best.
hmm,
But as I said, I've never really been that ambitious.
hmm,
But then again, I've been very fortunate.
yeah.
I mean, very fortunate.
Hmm. I wanted to mention your co-star in Tucked, Gordon Stevens, who plays the wonderful Faith. What was your kind of
Oh,
relationship?
we got on like a house on fire.
Yeah.
And I mean, he again was very pleasant because he said at the end of the film, I've learned so much from you. And I felt like this old decrepit actor.
Hmm. Well, I suppose you got somebody who's kind of um well, obviously a drag queen who's much older than the other performers, and obviously
Yes,
being put the oldest member of the cast, you kind of can
yeah.
mirror
And the
that.
relationship is so fascinating between them. And
Yeah,
of course, unless you get on well, you can't get that.
mm,
And we got on extremely well.
yeah.
I think he's a very talented actor.
Oh, it's a like your performance, and it's a
Yeah,
fearless performance. You
yeah.
you
I think
guys
he's
give
very
it
talented.
everything, and also April Pearson, who plays your
Yes,
daughter, and
which
I
is
think,
Jamie Patterson's wife.
oh right, yes, yeah,
She
he got
was she's very, very good.
yeah, got some lovely scenes in
That
that.
big scene at the end was one take.
Hmm. Oh, it's an
All of
astonishing
it.
scene. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And things
uh,
happened.
yeah.
Things happened.
Hmm. Did it go through different? I don't want to spoil it too much. For people that may have not seen it yet. For those that haven't seen it, it is on Amazon Prime. It's free, so it's well worth checking out. Did it sort of um did it go for different endings, or was it sort of very clear did the script kind of change much during the production?
Well, no, not really. But Jamie Patterson was saying, it's not the words that matter. It's really the thoughts, which is exactly what it should be, you know.
Yeah.
And one again has faith in you. You can sum a director up pretty quickly, and you have to have faith that they know what they're doing
Hmm.
and they can see what's happening, and they can either agree with it and give you the nod, and so you feel more comfortable because you're really out in the wilds as an actor. You are him, and you are very vulnerable. I
And
mean, I found the scene in the churchyard very, very moving.
yeah.
That was difficult.
Again, I think that's a lovely scene in the film, and again, probably a one take thing because you want that raw emotion to come
Yeah, yeah, it
through.
was very
Yeah,
difficult, very painful.
yeah. And I think what's so lovely about Tucked is kind of the sort of the vulnerability of the character, and also you're getting getting ready, and you're not afraid to have a bit of nudity in the film. And
That's it. It's
it
very
I,
sad, very funny
yeah,
too,
yeah,
and very sweet.
yeah. Yes, it's very sweet. It is quite funny.
It's
It kind
rather
of,
like life. I
yeah,
think people like it because they recognize life.
yes, yeah, I think so. And I think people sometimes say, well, with certain things, is it a comedy? Is it a tragedy? But a life is everything. So
It's
of course,
everything.
that's, I think, what
Yes, yeah, it's
mirrors.
so true, so true,
Yeah, yeah.
so true.
And I think Tuck very much sort of mirrors that
Well,
kind.
thank you, thank you.
Mhm. That do you have any other favorite moments from the film, any particular scenes that
Well,
were?
no, I mean, someone's asked me to do another film because I mean, I don't do this anymore because we run, this company now, which is
Yeah,
one of the leading um, exam boards. But I've seen the script and I've spoken to the director, and there is a possibility there. It could be an interesting little film.
yeah. Oh, it'd be lovely if you did, because you just have to,
See how it runs.
yeah, yeah. The range you've got is, I think, quite rare, really, to sort of do. So
Thank you,
it's
thank you.
certainly Tuck leaves you wanting to see a lot more of you. I think, yeah. Um, so just to sort of finish off with the Persuaders, is it something that a show that people do keep asking you about? Is it something that you're quite nice to have on your CV?
I've never had a CV.
No, no.
No.
Yeah. I suppose your agent kind of does it all, don't they? And kind of sort of
Well,
you
presumably.
but it's nice to be involved in these shows, I take it, because
Well, yes. I mean,
you-
there was someone who was kind enough to be a fan. I think who sent me something once, and I was amazed of all the things.
mm,
Some great number of them I've forgotten completely.
yeah. I'll just have to see if there's any more questions from the audience that I haven't answered. And then she'll wrap it up. Quite an interesting question. Working with Roger Moore and Tony Curtis, were they both as nice as each other? Did they
Oh
get on
yes,
very well
they
together?
got on like a house on
Mm,
fire,
yeah,
and they were quite different. I mean, Tony Curtis was so different from the way he worked, but they got on so well together.
mm,
I think I remember I remember saying to Tony Curtis, um, "I believe you worked with Marilyn Monroe," and I said, "You, I love one take." And he said, "Yeah, yeah, one take. You too." I said, "Yes, yeah." I said, "I believe that Marilyn Monroe sometimes had 70 takes," and his eyes went up. He said, "After five, all I could think of was dinner."
because of course he knew Marilyn Monroe before she became famous, of course, so he
Well, I
had a
think
good,
yes, in that some
yeah,
like it hot,
yeah,
but she was famous for a huge
yeah,
number of takes.
yeah.
How, but Tony, how do
Mm.
you work?
Yeah, I think it must be quite difficult. Uh, t- so yeah, so Tony and Roger, because of course so much of the Persuaders is about their chemistry, and of
But they
course,
were very close.
it,
It was
yeah,
nice to watch.
yeah, and the differences, of course, is what makes it so successful.
So different.
Because there has been, of course, certain times where they've been saying, "Oh, they'll remake the Persuaders," and I think you can remake the Saint and other shows like
You can
that,
never
but
go back.
you can't do the Persuaders because it is
You
very
can never
much
go back.
yeah, and it's
You
Curtis
can never
plus,
go back
you
in
know,
any aspect
mm,
of life,
no,
whatever it is. You
no,
can't go back.
yeah,
It only becomes
mm,
so terribly depressing and wrong.
mm,
And
it,
you can never create that first impression, no matter what the first impression was.
yeah, yeah. I think it's perhaps different with a literary character like James Bond or the Saint, where there's kind of always a history of reincarnation with it, but with a
Yeah.
show that is so
But the true story of Bond I will not go into you with it now, but to tell you that the true story of how Dr. No started is something that people have no understanding of whatsoever. I just leave that as a, because I know, because when I was doing my film, I got all the best people. You know, Angela Allen was my continuity. They were doing it for me as a favor.
Yeah.
And the editor told me. So the true story is unbelievable.
And that was Peter Hunt, wasn't it? The editor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he was of course very responsible for the look and style of those films. So yes, he would have kind of an
He
inside
was the
knowledge
father.
on
Yeah, then so I
yeah.
leave it with you.
Yeah.
The true story, which
Yeah.
I know intimately, is one that people will never believe.
Maybe we'll go into that another
Never
time.
believe.
Quite tantalizing.
I mean, they'll never believe how he was cast.
Yeah.
They'll never believe how Cubby Broccoli had no idea. I mean, they will. Quite remarkable. That's for another day.
Yeah. And I think so much of it is luck, isn't it, as well, with
Oh, it's all luck, really. It's all to do with luck.
Yeah.
But the true stories are sometimes extraordinary.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just a bit of trivia that someone's mentioned. You played, you did a film called Flawless, where you play a character called Sinclair. So of course that's an interesting Persuaders connection. But
Oh,
Sinclair.
really? I didn't know. What was it?
A film called Flawless.
Oh, Flawless.
Yeah.
Great fun. Yeah, great fun. Talk about that. That was once when I rush in and scream at this elderly man. He wasn't in the script, to scream. So I said to the director, I want to frighten this man. I really want to frighten him. So if we do a rehearsal, he'll know what I'm going to do. Trust me, shoot it. So I went in there and I screamed at him. He went white. He had no idea. It was such a true reaction that he thought, Derren has gone berserk. He's gone mad. He's going to kill me. And it was a great reaction.
Yeah. Just a last minute question come in. Did you ever meet Sean Connery at all in any?
A what?
Did you ever meet Sean Connery at all in?
No, I never met him.
No.
Oh, I did meet him once, but only in passing.
Yeah.
But how he got the part, whoever asked the question, is extraordinary.
I'll look forward to going through that with
extraordinary.
Yeah. And lastly, do you have any final thoughts about being involved in these sort of shows? And is it
well, nostalgia, really?
Yeah.
Nostalgia. Maybe I should have tried harder. Maybe maybe if I didn't have fortunate enough to be, wealthy, because we started a small company, my brother and I, called Our Price Records, which is another story.
Yeah.
But and so and my family were very, very wealthy, so I was extremely lucky man.
Yeah.
And there's not a day goes past when I don't think that.
Yeah, I think you've been in so many wonderful films and TV shows, and maybe the secret was that you were able to kind of guide your career in a way that maybe other people couldn't.
I never guided it. Never guided it. It was just what happened.
So almost like where the wind took you, sort of thing, and
whatever came up, came up.
Yeah. But I think it's a nice way to be, isn't it? To sort of have that kind of.
It's a very fortunate way to be. And I'm very, very grateful that I should have been, in that position.
Well, I think it's quite a lovely place to end it. Thank you, Derren, for talking to me.
It's been my pleasure. It's been enjoyable.
Oh, good. And we must do this again sometime soon.
Right. Okay. All the best to you. And now I'm going to try and turn it off.
Well, enjoy the rest of your weekend and take care, Derren.
Thank you.
I'll end the session.
Okay.
Okay. Take care.
Take care. Thanks, everybody.
That's right. Bye-bye.
Bye.